This is Wheelbearings. I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad.
So it's been a little while. We had some travel. There were some shows. Sam, you were out at the Nvidia thing while New York was going on, and I was at work. So I didn't go anywhere.
Slacker.
Yeah, right, exactly. But we have a bunch of interesting things to talk about because there was, those events, and companies like to announce things at events.
That's what events are for.
But first, we shall get into what we're driving. So what have you been in?
Well, before I headed out to California last week, I was driving the 2018 Honda Accord Touring 2.0T, and the new Accord, which I think is like the 9th or 10th generation Accord. I don't know. It's who counts anymore. Anyway, it came out last year, and it won the North American Car of the Year in January, and it's a really good car.
And nobody's buying it.
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody's buying any of the midsize sedans, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or cars in general. But, this is, I would say right now, the Accord is probably the best car in the segment. Of course, next week, who knows, when something new comes out. But for now, it's a fantastic car. This time around, when Honda redid this Accord, they dropped the coupe. The sedan now has more quote unquote coupe-like styling. So it's basically, it's a fastback design like the Civic sedan. It's got 4-cylinder engines only this time around. So there's the 1.5 liter turbo from the Civic and a 2-liter turbo, which is basically a detuned version of the engine in the Civic Type R, with I think 252 horsepower, 265 or so foot-pounds of torque, and it's a great engine. And the amazing thing is you can actually get an Accord with that 2-liter turbo engine and a 6-speed manual gearbox with 3 full pedals. Unfortunately, the one I had did not have the manual transmission. It was the new 10-speed automatic, which debuted on the Odyssey last year.
Well, so at least it wasn't the CVT.
No. The CVT is only available with the 1.5 liter. So if you get the 2-liter, you get this 10-speed, which is a really great transmission, for an automatic. Shifts are completely seamless. The touring version that I had has paddles on the steering wheel, so you can do manual shifting if you are so inclined. But the engine, has plenty of torque, more than enough get up and go, for anything you're going to want to do. And, if you want something a little bit sportier, I think if you go with the Accord Sport 2.0T, that's about as close as you're going to get to, an Accord Type R for the foreseeable future.
Well, and the Sport is going to be sporty enough for just about anyone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I do like they seem to have gotten a little looser with the specifications this time, so you can even get a non-sport Accord equipped in a way that will please the driver. Because the part of the problem with the Accord Sport in the past has been it was really limited in terms of even the color, and that was how it was possible, I think, for a large degree, just because they limit all of the various versions, and that made it affordable enough to build and to sell. Honda has a pretty tight eye on the bottom line, maybe more so, I think, than other automakers, because they're smaller. So they tend not to make stuff that they can't make money on.
Yeah, well, I mean, Honda and also Toyota as well have always been pretty tight in terms of the number of buildable combinations you can get. And, that's a pattern that we're now starting to see copied by other manufacturers. Ford is definitely moving in that direction on the 2019 Fusion, the refresh Fusion. I think they're down to something like 32 buildable combinations down from hundreds of thousands.
Well, I think that probably makes room, though. Yeah, that probably makes room for like the F-150 that has like 43 million different ways to configure it.
It's not exaggerated. I think it's only 12 million.
Okay. Either way, like, but there's that part of it. But by limiting, I think limiting the buildable combinations, it's smart in a way, right? Like, you don't buy any other thing sort of quite as customized other than maybe a house, or you don't go buy a fridge like with option packages.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The fewer different build combinations you have, the easier, certainly the easier it is to guarantee, consistency, consistent quality of the builds. And it makes it easier, for the dealers. They don't have to worry about stocking as many different variations. And, the reality is, even when you have hundreds of thousands or millions of build combinations, there's usually only a few dozen that account for, typically, upwards of 95% of all the actual builds that happen.
Right.
By getting rid of, all those edge cases where there's, they sell, 20 or 30 of them in a model year, it just simplifies everything, all the way down the supply chain.
Well, the dealers are only going to order the cars that they know they can sell for the most part. They may do one or two oddballs, but in general, they're not going to go for stuff that can't be sold. So it makes sense to just trim those right out of the lineup.
Right. And, part of the reason, and, that's of course a big part of the reason why, so few build combinations account for such a high percentage of the sales, because particularly here in the US, very few people actually, custom order a car anyway. The vast majority of customers that buy cars just walk into the showroom, and they buy one out of the dealer inventory, or worst case, they might have, if they're looking for a particular package, but with a different color, they might have a dealer, do a dealer locate and, swap a car with another dealer, but in general, the vast majority of cars in the US are sold right out of dealer inventory. And so that's why they order, only the ones that they're confident that they can actually sell.
Yeah. So our little dealer, sort of ordering, aside, is over now. What did you think of the car, though? Because to me, the Accord this generation of Accord is kind of like a return to what has classically made the Accord great. I think it's a lot sharper looking than at least the last two generations, if not three generations of the car. It's still kind of conservative, but it's delicately styled, and just it looks like a Honda. And I don't know what it is that makes it look like a Honda.
No, I agree. I think it's definitely got a more modern look to it. It's a sleek look. It's not as conservative looking as the last couple of generations, which were more upright sedan designs. The interior, I think is Honda's always, generally done a pretty good job on their interiors, and that is true again of this one. And this new Accord, finally ditches the dual screen setup that they've had on the past generation Accord. So you now have just a single touchscreen, up in the top, and it's, one of these, more like a tablet style where the screen is not embedded right into the dashboard. So it sits up a little bit higher, which means it's closer to your line of sight. You don't have to look as far down for it. The model, the one I had was a touring model, which is the high end trim level. So it was basically, loaded up with just about everything, including a heads up display. It had the Honda sensing on there. Well, actually, Honda sensing package is standard equipment on the Accord for 2018. So you get things like adaptive cruise control and a lane keeping system.
That's every Accord, not just the touring?
That's on 100% of 2018 Accords.
Wow.
So you get that no matter what, if you buy the basic EX model all the way up to the top end touring model, you get those features on there, which is great.
Is that the camera-based system like Subaru does, or is it?
No, it's the lane keeping is camera-based. The adaptive cruise control is a radar cruise control system.
Huh.
So one thing that interestingly is not included in the standard package is the blind spot monitoring. But that's available as part of a separate package, which is unfortunate because I think that's actually a very useful feature. And if anything, I would take the blind spot monitor over the lane keeping system. But that's and that's actually the approach that Ford is taking with their CoPilot package that they're making standard on the Fusion this year for 2019. Is they're going with they're going with lane keeping and collision alert and the blind spot monitor, and you pay extra. You can buy the adaptive cruise control separately. Honda and Toyota both have the adaptive cruise control and lane keeping as standard, with the blind spot monitor as a separate standalone option. So
it's enough to make your head spin. They're not doing. Have they finally decided not to do that lane watch nonsense?
Oh yeah, lane watch is history. I mean, it's still on the Civic until it gets its mid-cycle refresh. But like for example, and that may well be for the 2019 models because the new Insight that debuted in production form last week in New York is based on the Civic, and it ditches lane watch as well and goes to a proper radar blind spot monitor system.
I mean, to be fair, it was a try. It was worth seeing.
It was a swing and a miss, but
yeah.
What are you going to do?
So you had the Touring, so that has the adaptive dampers. It must have driven pretty well.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. You got the normal and sport and comfort modes, and it's quick, very nimble feeling. For what is a pretty large sedan. I think the one thing that I would have preferred to see Honda do with this is kind of go the same direction that Buick has done with the new Regal, which is, since you've got this fastback design, just make it a hatchback. It's got a decent sized trunk opening, but if I'm going to have a car this shape, I would just as soon have the whole rear end lift up, so, if I've got really big objects, I can get them in there. But aside from that, it's really impressive. I really like this car, and the one I drove was about $35,000 because, like I said, it was the top end touring model. It was loaded with pretty much everything. But you can get the base LX starting at 23.6, and then it goes up from there. But the sport, you can get the Sport 2.0T for about for just under $30,000, which I think is a really good bargain. The one thing you don't get in the Sport is leather seats. It does come with cloth seats, but I think that's I could live with that. If I was going to be buying an Accord, that's probably the one I would go with, is the 2.0 manual transmission Sport.
Well, and that's something that is such a personal decision anyway. Like, some people love leather, some people don't. I don't know. It seems like either way you're going to displease one group of people unless you offer both, and then your costs are higher and whatever.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's how you keep those number of buildable combinations down, is you start to you make some hard decisions about which combinations are you actually going to build. And in Honda's case, they decided, okay, we're going to build a Sport with the 2-liter turbo and a manual transmission, but you're not going to get an automatic with it, or you're not going to get leather with it.
Yeah,
it does have a sunroof, but no leather.
I do think it's I don't know. I think it's kind of funny that the Sport. I don't know. I guess it's still kind of a not trying to be like this sort of like BMW or Acura kind of thing where there's that like little bit of luxury. It's more of like an old school sort of like sporty car. Like it's entertaining to drive, but it's still kind of basic.
Well, certainly I think in the case of the Civic Sport, it is more basic because the Civic Sport, is based on the base level Civic EX model, or LX, the LX, and it just adds bigger wheels, a few extra horsepower, things like that. In the case of the Accord Sport, it does have some additional amenities in there. So you do get things like a nice audio system and some other features in there, and of course it does have the Honda sensing package as standard on there. So I think it's a really good compromise, especially if you get the 2-liter over the 1.5. And the audio system, I talked about the screen. It does have both rotary volume and tuning knobs on it, and supports Android Auto and CarPlay.
Yeah, and so that's an upgrade. Though the standard, the LX and the hybrid don't have that audio system. They have, at least they don't have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard. At least from what I can see. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but it seems like that's not necessarily a standard feature on the Accord. You have to actually bump up to get it, or at least.
Yeah, I think you have to. Maybe not. It looks like it's got I'm looking at the LX interior, and it looks like it has the same display, touchscreen display radio in it.
Like in pictures, it looks beautiful. It looks good.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is. I mean, you lived with it. How is it in operation?
It's great. It's, like I said, it's very fun to drive. Everything works really well. I think it's just a really well sorted out car. It's what we have traditionally expected of Hondas. Executed perfectly. I really had no complaints about this car.
Not even like, certainly nobody misses the dual screens, but they managed to not screw that up. Going to a single, because Honda has not been typically great at infotainment. Yeah,
the new audio system, the upgraded audio system is considerably more powerful. Like I said, it doesn't have the touch, the touch controls for volume, and it's got the physical knobs. It's significantly more responsive. The interface is a lot better looking than for example, the one in our Civic. I'm hard pressed to come up with any real complaints about this car.
Yeah, except for it's a sedan and nobody's buying them.
Well, I mean, to me, that's not a complaint. Well, I guess the one complaint I had is that I would just as soon it be a hatchback. But other than that, there's not much else to complain about it.
Well, I mean, it's a pretty tight range too. You mentioned prices. It starts at like 23, and yours is optioned up. It's the top of the range at 35. Like, you can push a Fusion well into, or at least pretty solidly, depending on the Fusion, into the 40s.
Oh yeah, I mean, if you go with the Fusion Platinum, or the Sport, you can get up to about $40,000 without trying too hard.
Yeah, and as good a car as that is, because the Fusion's a good car, it's not anywhere near as pleasing to drive as even the last Accord I was in, where they feel like two different things, and I know which one I would prefer.
Yeah, no, I would definitely choose the Accord over the Fusion.
So we'll see how that shakes out. I mean, I think that, given all the accolades it's gotten, it's going to be hard to beat, in part because, at least from a driver's perspective, I mean, I don't know that any other automaker really has the stomach for it. And honestly, they probably don't need to. Given where everybody's going, they need to put their energy into where the people are buying right now, and that's crossovers. Sedans,
and that's what Honda and everybody else is doing.
Yeah,
they are going in that direction. With crossovers, we're going to see more crossovers from both the Honda and Acura brands. And I'm just looking at the specs and features for the Accord, and you're right. The base LX model does not get Android Auto and CarPlay support, so it's a little less feature capable version of the audio system. It looks the same, yeah, but it's got less features in it. And then from the Sport on up, all the others. So basically everything except the very lowest end base LX have Android Auto and CarPlay support. And one of the other things that they've got in here, which granted is also in some, I've experienced it in some Mercedes cars as well, is there's a little NFC reader built into the dashboard just to the left of the radio. So if you're not using Android Auto or CarPlay, if you have a phone that has NFC built into it, to set up Bluetooth, all you do is just hold your phone next to that little NFC logo on the dashboard, and it will automatically pair it for you, so you don't have to go through all the pairing rigmarole.
Oh, that's what that weird little icon thing is on the dash?
Yeah, that's the NFC reader. And Mercedes-Benz has that on several of their models now, and Honda is the first mainstream one that I'm aware of that does that. So if all you want to do is just pair your phone with Bluetooth and not use the other stuff, you can you just tap it on there. Assuming your phone has NFC, just tap it on there and it will automatically pair.
My last phone had NFC. I don't even know if my current one does. I'd have to look. I mean, that's cool. It's also available in a wide array of grays and whites.
There's also a red and a blue.
There are, and there's a black.
Yeah. Although I strongly recommend you choose either the red or the blue, because you want it to stand out.
It's just so funny. It's like you've got white orchid, lunar silver, modern steel.
I know.
Champagne frost.
Don't even get me started on this, ridiculously monochromatic color palette that car makers are offering now.
Listen, there's Kona
and
coffee.
Honda's as bad as anybody on that.
Well, you can get a brown. It does look. It looks. I don't know.
It's a grayish brown.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a pretty gray brown.
It's going to look good in that red though. That red with
the blue is also really good.
Yeah.
I like the blue. I'm partial to the blue. But the one I had was one of the grays, which is
of course,
it's gray. What are you going to say?
Yeah. Well, hey, I also had a gray car this week. So
what did you have?
I had it was gray like a battleship, and it was about the same size. I had a BMW 740e, which is a new 740 model for 2018, but it's basically a hybrid. Plug-in hybrid.
Actually, they've had the plug-in hybrid for a year or two, because I had one about a year ago.
Okay, so it was my first introduction to it. It was like, oh yeah, I forgot they were going to do that, because you pay more attention than I do apparently. And it was like it's the it's the high end 7 Series. So they all kind of blend together after a while. You go, oh yes, that's a big car I can't afford. It's a lovely vehicle. It just really, really, really impressive. I came away astounded at how well done it is. For a company that resisted hybrids and electrification for so long, BMW makes a really good hybrid. The last couple ones I've driven, I've really liked the way they drive.
And it's kind of odd to think of a car that big, powered by a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine.
Yeah, but that's so. I was thinking about this as I was driving it today too. It's like, I don't mind it. I came up on European cars at a time when it wasn't uncommon for even the top end of a model, of the range to have a 4-cylinder. But this is the first 4-cylinder powered 7 Series in the U.S. market. They might have had 4-cylinders in the 7s before, but generally they've been 6s or 8s or 12s, not 4s. But if you don't like 4-cylinders, you're not going to like it here, because you can hear it. It's not obtrusive. It's very muted, but it's there. Other than that, you don't really feel it. It's not buzzy. It's a very smooth car. It's very well isolated. With the hybrid powertrain too, you certainly never feels like it lacks any power. It moves off quite smartly. It's very satisfying to drive, I guess, unless you're going to drive it like it's a sports sedan, because it's definitely a cruiser. It's not the BMW for fast driving attempts.
Well, anything this long is,
and it's capable.
It's going to be a bit of a cruiser.
Well, what surprised me was how nimble it feels, and you can feel the rear wheel steering working. It's just like that subtle way that it messes with your head because it rotates in a way that it's not supposed to. You're like, well, what's going on? We're turning much tighter, because it almost feels like you've broken the rear end loose, because you're getting that little bit of rear steering, and it's not like passive rear steering where some cars, you lean on them a little bit, and the what's the big word? Elastokinematics are set up so that it once you get that weight transfer, then things start to flex. It has like a little steering rack back there. It just turns the wheels, and the car just turns. It rotates it around a different point. It's a little weird, but it's also impressive because it makes the car shrink in terms of how it feels when you drive it. And so I liked that a lot. It's actually quite pleasing to drive on a windy road. I wouldn't suggest pushing it too much because, in 740 E-trim, it's heavy. It has probably more body roll than any other 7 Series. Still really well behaved, though. It has standard air suspension, so it just glides over everything. I mean, they make such a good luxury car. They do. I mean, the only place really to go from here is Rolls-Royce, and BMW happens to own that too. So
yeah, well, I mean, Rolls-Royces are based off of 7 Series platforms. So.
Yeah, it's a really. I was calling it, and I suck at German because I never took any German class, but I think it's called a Das Kaiser Panzer, which it's basically just like the Kaiser's tank, and that's what it really is. It just feels, like it just glides over road imperfections, but not in the way that, like a town car would, where it's just floats. It doesn't float. You feel it absorb stuff, and it settles. It's really, really quite planted. There were a couple of things I wasn't so enraptured with. For such a good highway car, I thought the fuel tank was kind of small, because I found that I was only getting about 320 miles between refuelings. I put about.
Well, you have to make room for the battery.
Yeah, and that's where it is. It eats the trunk from, I think the standard 7 Series trunk is like 18 cubic feet, and it's down to about 15, which is still a good size, but it's for the size of the car, it's a noticeable bite out of the trunk. And it cruises so well on the highway. Every 300 something miles, you got to stop. And I put about 10 or 11 gallons in it. So I was surprised it doesn't have that much capacity. But on the other hand, it's not too bad to get out and stretch your legs either.
Yeah.
The materials and design on it are just outstanding. Every detail has been fussed over. It's kind of that what's always made big BMWs great, even back to my favorites of the E38s of the 7s. They're just big, high-tech flagships. They do deserve the name, but with that comes some of the BMW stuff now that has the capacity to drive you a little crazy. The way they've redesigned the automatic transmission shifter, so you have to actually push it forward if you want to engage reverse, which it's still, like, for me, it's cognitive dissonance. Some of the times the door handles require 2 pulls because it's locked, and you pull it once and then it's like 9, and you pull it again and it goes okay.
If you insist.
Yeah.
If you must get out,
and
I will let you out.
The fob is so big.
Well, and I think here in the U.S. we don't even have the version of the fob that's available in Europe. They have one, like in Europe, you can get the 7 Series with a fob that actually has a touchscreen on it to do things like the remote parking. They offer a remote parking system that they don't offer here yet for various liability reasons.
Yeah, so it did have a touchscreen because I could set it.
So yours had a touchscreen?
It didn't have the like go park yourself kind of thing, but it had it did have a touchscreen because I was playing with it to set the preconditioning, which is nice. You plug it into it's a plug-in hybrid. I think it has like a 9-something kilowatt-hour battery in it, so it doesn't give you a ton of range on electric.
It's good for about 14 miles.
Yeah. something like that. And you can actually, you know, there's different modes, so you can save the battery for like in-town driving and stuff. So you're not just wasting it on that first little bit of highway where the car's going to do okay anyway. So some of that stuff is nice, but like the fob is the size of a flip phone. It's enormous. It's just like, how do you put that in your pocket? Where do you stick it? And you know, like I wanted it to have like other features. Like I certainly with a fob that big, I should be able to call somebody. It should have like Snake on it. So when I'm bored in a store or something, I can like play whatever. I think that's probably a thing. We're either going to go with just big fobs or the access cards or something. There's not going to be any middle ground. It's going to be either big and obnoxious or small and elegant.
So speaking of monochromatic color palettes, I'm looking at the BMW USA website right now, the build and price for the 7 Series. And, you know, I mean, this is even less vibrant in terms of colors than Honda's palette.
Oh, yeah.
You have your choice of carbon black metallic, black sapphire metallic, cashmere silver metallic, which is a slightly champagne tinted silver, glacier silver.
I think that's what this one is. No, maybe this is more of a gray. It's hard to tell.
Imperial blue, which might as well be black. Dark graphite metallic, which might as well be black. Alpine white, mineral white, Singapore gray, Jatoba brown, which is actually the only one that actually really looks like a color. And the one, the 740 I had last year was in fact brown. And then there's Magellan gray, Arctic gray, and jet black.
All of the grays.
Yes.
Yeah, but you know, like I think that's part of that is the BMW thing. They know that people want them in those colors, but they're also selective about sort of the difference, you know, the subtle differences.
Well, the thing about BMW though, especially like with, you know, the high end models like the 7 Series, you can go into a BMW dealer and they have their individual program.
Yeah, and
so if you want a different color, they will happily build you one in whatever color you want, even if it's something that they've never built before. You know, if you want to match your sofa in your living room, or match, you know, your girlfriend's hair color, you know, just bring us a sample in and they will color match it and they will paint it whatever color you want for a suitable, you know, premium, you know, and put, you know, whatever color leather or any other material on the seats, you know, again, for a suitable upcharge. You know, so that, you know, and the same thing applies to all of the German brands, you know, Mercedes-Benz will do this and Audi, you know, or, you know, of course, you know, Rolls and Bentley and those guys as well. So, you know, you're not limited to what's in the catalog.
No, not at all. But so the thing that I think astounded me the most was like, this is it's really, I didn't like the 5 Series. I thought, oh, okay, so clearly the 5 Series that we have now is really sounding the death knell for the sports sedan. You know, for anybody who's a fan of like the E39 or the E34, the new 5 Series, it's just this bloated kind of big thing. But the 7 Series was never really supposed to be that kind of a sports sedan anyway. It was always a larger cruiser. So this car just feels wholly appropriate. It is big. It's big and yet rigid, and it still performs pretty well when you want it to. The engineering is all over it, you know, in terms of just, you know, that's how they built their brand. So you look around and you can see all of the touches where, you know, there's those pass-throughs from the front air dam. You can look and there's the duct that makes this little bubble around the wheels for aerodynamics, and just all of those things. Everywhere you look, there's just it's been attended to, and that's when you're spending $99,000, which I thought was kind of a bargain for what you get in terms of the way the car has been just fussed over and really well done. Certainly not cheap, but, you know, consider the competitive set. I didn't think it was that bad of a deal. It feels like it's worth it, you know? maybe I was just very smitten this week, but I was impressed with it. And it has the BMW ADAS stuff, which is, it's fantastic. Their dynamic cruise control is probably some of my favorite. Anytime I get a BMW, I know that the dynamic cruise is going to be really good, really well tuned. It's not going to be jerky. It's going to be very smooth. It's going to handle stop and go traffic really well. They know how to make it just work. I did try the lane keeping as well. I didn't find that as confidence inspiring as I would like. It basically oscillates from the left extremity of a lane to the right extremity of a lane. It kind of wanders back and forth a little bit, and it's just correcting every time it detects how close it is to the lines. It adds in a little correction. So you kind of go down the road like a little sinusoidal kind of side to side thing. But it works, and you have to keep a hand on the wheel. So I got to sort of questioning why would you want that? Because you either want that stuff so you can mentally disengage, or so it saves you. And I guess, and it still has the steering intervention as like that fail safe. I wound up shutting all that stuff off just so it wouldn't fight me. But you can have the steering intervention without having the lane keeping. And I think that's okay. But if you have the lane keeping, you're kind of sending the message to the driver like, yeah, you don't have to quite pay quite as much attention. And I think that's dangerous. And B, if you can't really do it, you shouldn't. Like if it's not good enough for you to ignore it, then it shouldn't be in the car, I guess.
I couldn't agree more on that. And, I've written about that numerous times now, in various places on our company blog at Navigant Research. I've written about it on Forbes, and I've done, one of my columns for Automotive Engineering magazine was on that very topic of, kind of these intermediate automation systems that, they fall into this uncanny valley of, you can't rely on them enough to be able to really tune out. And as a result, you end up, I think a lot of time, it works just enough that you can become complacent, and then you end up getting in trouble, which, maybe is a good point to jump into one of the topics that we had tonight, which is another autopilot related death, with, a driver in California, driving a Tesla Model X about a week and a half ago, ran into a center median, a concrete barrier in Mountain View, and the car, it was in autopilot mode. Tesla, over the weekend acknowledged that the car was in fact running in autopilot mode. And the National Transportation Safety Board is investigating this one right now. The driver had apparently complained, about the system not really working reliably, beforehand, and had taken it into the dealer, and they said, well, there's nothing wrong with this. It's working as it's supposed to, which, I think is that's the fundamental issue here. But there's also another issue in that, in the statement that Tesla put out, they said that the driver had been alerted and, did not have his hands on the wheel at the time of the crash, and, had been alerted to put his hands on the wheel. And, this is a problem that a lot of drivers of these cars, when they get into trouble, that's why they're getting into trouble, because aside from Cadillac Super Cruise, every single one of these systems is designed to be hands-on. You are not supposed to take your hands off the wheel. Listen, everybody out there. There are no self-driving cars that you can buy today. Tesla Autopilot, Mercedes Intelligent Drive, Volvo Pilot Assist, none of them can drive themselves. Keep your hands on the wheel. Pay attention to the road. The systems are designed to assist you. They are not designed to take over. And, while clearly, the system, failed to do even its basic job in this particular instance of, the auto steer system did not keep the car in the middle of the lane like it's supposed to. The fact is, the driver had experienced this before, knew that it was a problem, and yet continued to use the AutoPilot system and continued to take his hands off the wheel. So I think I think it's Tesla, basically needs to disable the system until they get it sorted out, because, from talking to people that own various Teslas with AutoPilot on there, it's clearly not sufficiently robust to be relied on, and so it should be disabled. But if you do have it, if it tells you to put your hands on the wheel, put your hands on the wheel, no matter what brand of car it is.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things going on here too, though. Like, Tesla has done such a terrible job at any time there's an incident, and this one too. They waited to verify whether or not AutoPilot was engaged. They dropped it on a Friday night for whatever sort of diversionary tactic, or just to hopefully bury it, or just have it not get picked up. They're not helping themselves appear transparent, whether they are or not. They're providing false transparency. Yeah, and beyond that, if I'm an automaker and my product is involved in an incident, especially an incident where there's a fatality, I'm going to have a well-tuned response to that, and I just haven't seen that from Tesla. They're sloppy. They're all over the place, and that's disturbing, I think, to just see. That if this happened with, General Motors, or, I'm trying to, even Mitsubishi, I'm trying to think of like a small automaker. They would have a much more buttoned up response to this. Just, our teams are looking at it. We're working with the NTSB. We can't verify anything. First of all, you kind of don't want to be out there dropping details of an ongoing investigation anyway, whether or not it exonerates your product. You just, you have to sort of keep it under wraps and let the thing play out. It seems like they need some media training, and part of the problem is Elon Musk.
And the problem there is, Elon's going to do whatever Elon feels like doing. Yeah. This is part of why they've got a revolving door in their PR department, because nobody, he doesn't listen to anybody. He does whatever he feels like. That said, again, I don't think it was necessarily wrong for Tesla to acknowledge that, yes, AutoPilot was engaged at the time of the accident. However, the other stuff a lot of the other stuff that was in their statement, the excuses they were making, right. I think they would have been better off not to say any of that stuff, to leave that stuff to, the investigators, tell them, and just wait for them to complete their investigation, because, as it is right now, they're basically it was clear they were trying to put the blame on the driver. And granted, some of that blame does belong on the driver, because he did not listen. He knew that there was a problem with the system. He did not pay attention to the alerts, and he used the system as it's not intended to be used anyway. But this is however many incidents in now of right. Well, that's also why I say that, if a system is going to behave like that, if it's not going to behave consistently, which is, that's the fundamental problem with all these systems, is they're inconsistent in their behavior. And if it's not going to behave consistently, then it should be turned off. It should not be used. Manufacturers need to turn them off until they can get them sorted out. And frankly, the more I drive a lot of these, these partially automated systems, these level 2 systems, like AutoPilot and, all the other various branded systems out there, the more inclined I am to, the stronger my opinion gets that we should not even be offering these systems to customers. Yeah. Because I don't think that they are beneficial. It was an interesting contrast to go back and forth between the 740 and the Crown Victoria, because they're roughly the same size. But it was really interesting to go from a car that's... There's an interesting contrast. Yeah, Crown Victoria, the BMW 740. It's certainly an unfair comparison, but it was just like, they're both a couple 100 inches long. They're both big cars. And certainly one is a lot more basic than the other. You could say that. But
there's a certain immediacy from that basicness. Like, we have bloated cars up with lots and lots of filter layers between driver and hardware. And so to get in something that admittedly it's not anywhere near as good as the hardware that's in the BMW, but the immediacy of the way the machine works with you, and the fact that you don't have all these little electronic things doing their electronic things, and there's just like there's the wheel, there's cruise control, you got the radio. That's it. Like, oh, it has climate control, so it will automatically keep you comfortable ish. I mean, the seats are kind of crappy, so it'll keep the temperature comfortable. But you know what I mean? Like, it's just this interesting contrast, and I think that there's a lot to be said for examining that, at least as an idea. Is like, well, wait a minute, what are we really doing to ourselves? I'm not sure that the rush to these systems is driven by anything other than having something else to sell. I mean, in the case of companies that are developing autonomy, I think there's a lot of other motivations. But from a consumer level, like, I would never pay extra for self-driving cruise. It's not compelling enough to me. And I like driving, so I'm not really the target audience either. But if it were good enough, I would accept it a lot more. But I don't think that it's not compelling. Like I said, it's just not something that I think should be in the cars because of what it does to your mental state. You know, you want to check out. That's why it's there, right? That's how it's sold as a way to, sort of reduce the burden on the driver. Well, the problem is you've reduced the burden so that when something happens, when they need to be engaged, they're not ready for it. Yeah, they don't understand what's going on, and then and
that's exactly what happened. In the Uber crash. The fatal crash in Tempe, Arizona.
That's right.
The safety driver who was supposed to be paying attention was not. The car drove along on its own. Enough. That she relaxed and was not paying the attention that she should have been. And then, when it hit somebody, there was a fatality, and that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
And someday, at some point in the future, we will, autonomous vehicles, automated vehicles will probably be much safer than humans are. But the reality is that right now, at this moment in time, in April 2018, we don't actually have proof of that. Because, the automated vehicles that are on the road, in terms of, at least, vehicles that are at least level 4 capable, which means like they're supposed to be able to operate on their own without human intervention, without a human having to take over. And that's what all these vehicles from Waymo and Uber and GM and Ford and everybody else are supposed to be. These are prototypes. All those vehicles have accumulated roughly somewhere less than 10 million miles of real-world driving so far. And we know of one fatality right now as a result of that. And in normal driving in the United States right now, we have about 1.1 fatalities for every 100 million miles. So clearly, a single data point, which is what we have right now from the Uber crash, is not statistically significant. That said, people like Elon Musk are more than happy to spout off, statistically insignificant data. And based on that, we have one accident, one fatality for less than 10 million miles of autonomous driving versus 1.1 for every 100 million miles of human driving. So we still, at this point, have not actually validated that these vehicles are in fact safer than humans.
Well, it's this, like you said, your opinion has evolved over time with having actually spent time and experience with these systems. And while they work,
most of the time,
yeah, I mean, part of me just feels like we're just racing down this rabbit hole of a parlor trick, and I don't know whether it's the best use of effort. Like, what if we took some of the time and energy and put it elsewhere. What's the ultimate goal here?
What,
first of all,
like teaching humans to drive better?
Well, there's some of that,
attention?
And that's not the perfect solution either.
No, it's not. But it would certainly help.
I think it would. Yeah.
Getting more drunk drivers off the road would help. A third of all the fatalities are due to drunk drivers.
Yeah, well, and we've seen a rise in accidents because everybody's addicted to their little dopamine devices. So I don't know the best way to counter that, and it's certainly making the car watch out for you while you're going to distract yourself on purpose, no matter the fact that everybody knows that's super dangerous. I see people around me every day doing it anyway. Having a bunch of sensors and some automatic hardware, it's one solution. And, the automatic emergency braking seems to actually pay off a lot. Pedestrian detection seems to pay off probably a lot. So where's the balance? I don't know. I would hope that if we did invest in better driver's standards or something, that we do see a commensurate reduction in accidents. I part of it is that I'm a driver. I like to drive, right? So I want people around me to share the joy, or at least just pay as much attention as I try to. I don't know that it would 100% or would statistically significantly reduce incidents. My gut feeling is that it would, but who knows? Until we try it. We haven't tried it. It seems like there's that subset of like fully autonomous driving that's trying to replace humans because humans are labor and therefore they're expensive. They want to do things like get paid and unionize, and that's troublesome. And then there's
get things like health benefits and paid vacations.
Yeah, and then they're going to go out sick, and they're going to you're going to have to call in somebody to cover it. It's just a hassle.
I know.
And then
humans are such a pain in the neck.
There's that also the other subset of people who can't drive or who are less mobile,
and that is that's actually a very legitimate thing. People who either can't or won't drive, for whatever reason, whether it's because they're elderly or young or physically disabled in some way that prevents them from being able to drive, or they just prefer not to drive. And having options for those people, I think is extremely valuable. If we can provide mobility for people that's affordable and safe, I have no objections to that. But I just want to make sure that if we're going to do it via technology, that we can actually make sure that it is going to be both affordable and safe.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm just going to continue to complain about it for now. So let's just move on.
Okay.
So while the New York Auto Show was going on, and we'll get back to that, you went the other direction to the other coast, and you went to the Nvidia GTC, right? The
Nvidia GPU Technology Conference, which is
it had a big name.
Yeah, one of several such conferences that NVIDIA hosts in locations around the world every year, and their big one in San Jose, right near their headquarters, happens to always be the last week of March, and this year that happened to coincide with the New York Auto Show, which is sometimes in the last week of March and sometimes it's other dates, because it's tied to Easter. So this year, I went out to GTC because they were having lots of discussions about autonomous vehicles and what NVIDIA is doing in that space. And NVIDIA is, in terms of providing the compute platforms for these automated vehicles, NVIDIA is definitely one of the leaders in that space. They have really moved aggressively to make their chip technology be trying to make that be the preferred solution for automated vehicles. And that means that they are putting out some really high powered chips, but they're also working aggressively to reduce the electrical power consumption of those chips. When they started down this path a few years ago with their first generation of their Drive PX system, they were using their Parker chip, which was consuming a couple of 100 watts of power. And now their latest version, the Xavier, which actually combines a couple of different chips that they were using previously onto a single piece of silicon. It now does 30 teraflops of 30 trillion operations per second at 30 watts of power consumption. And their next generation one that they're now sampling is called their Drive PX Pegasus board, does 320 trillion operations per second to do some really gnarly AI calculations. They're doing some pretty incredible stuff. But one of the neat things they're doing is their simulation capabilities. So they're building these server machines that are able to run really amazing simulations, because one of the issues, I talked about, that we've, between all the various companies that are developing autonomous vehicles, they've run, somewhere less than 10 million miles on public roads of testing. And, with simulation, with high powered simulation, they can run millions of miles per day, running through, hundreds of thousands of different scenarios every day. So every time you make changes in the software, you can go back and rerun it through all these scenarios and make sure that when you fixed one thing, you haven't broken something else. So and that's going to be a key to all this.
How does that actually work? Like, how does that train the AI? Because you're not actually running it out in the real world. It's all simulation. So how does that?
Yeah, so what they've been doing is, Nvidia has a fleet of cars that are equipped with sensors that are not actually running autonomously. They're just going out and they've got drivers just going out and driving around collecting data. And every company developing automated systems is doing the same thing. They're using their autonomous vehicles, but they're also using other vehicles with sensors on there to go out and collect data about what's happening on the road, getting into all these different scenarios. And then they have to take this raw sensor data. It has to go through, it has to be processed, with a lot of human intervention, to go through and label everything. So they pick out the scenarios that look relevant and look interesting that they need to train the AIs with. And they go and label everything in there. So you label all the other vehicles, you label the pedestrians, you label cyclists, you label, everything that you want to be able to recognize in that scene has to be labeled. And then that data gets fed into the AI algorithms, into these neural networks, and you feed in all these different versions of data into it, and that trains the neural network. And then once you've done the training, then you have to take another set of data, a completely different set of data that is not labeled, and test it on that data, because you don't want to test it on the same data that you already trained it on. You have to test it on different data. So that means you have to collect a whole bunch of data. But as I said, it all to do the training, you need good data. So you have to go through and find the stuff that's relevant, and then it has to be accurately labeled. And so that's where, there's companies like Mighty AI, and there's a couple of other companies that specialize in doing this kind of stuff. So they'll take the raw data from companies like Nvidia and Intel and others, and they'll do the labeling and then give it back to them. And they'll also provide other data for training purposes. And then, what Nvidia announced last week, one of the things they announced is their Drive Constellation and Drive Sim. So Drive Constellation is basically this server platform that consists of a bunch of these Xavier chips, each one of which is used to simulate one of the sensors, and then a Pegasus board, which is their big honking controller board for that's designed for a level 5, a fully autonomous vehicle. And then they feed the data into the sensors and run it through the algorithms that are running on the Pegasus. And what they can do is they can use their graphics rendering capabilities that they have with their GPUs to take the raw labeled data that they have, and they can manipulate it so they can change the lighting conditions, so they can move the sun around to all kinds of different angles, and they can change the weather conditions so they can go from a clear sunny day to nighttime to raining to snow, and test it, so you can test the same scenario with all these different variations.
So do they need like extra chips to make the weather?
Yeah. Yeah, that's part of what all this, what the Drive Constellation system does. So Drive Sim is the software that runs all this, and Drive Constellation is the hardware platform that all this runs on. And it's, we're talking some serious computing horsepower here, but it's the only way that you can rack up millions of miles a day of testing in all these different scenarios and actually be able to validate that this stuff really works.
Huh. I mean, that's key. The thing that you shared with us over the weekend too, with the amount of raw power. They had a system that was like petaflops of data.
Well, that's something different. That's their DGX2 platform, which is just this. Jensen Huang, the founder and CEO of Nvidia, he does these unbelievable keynotes.
Yeah, you were pretty impressed with
presentation. Yeah, they go on for like 2.5 hours usually, and the thing is, he does all this without a script. He knows everything that's going on in his company. He understands all this technology, and he just gets up there and he's got a basic run of show. These are the topics we're going to cover, and they've got a bunch of slides, but he just talks for 2.5 hours, and they do these live demos, and it's pretty amazing. But the DGX2, he calls it the world's most powerful GPU. That it uses 16 of Nvidia's Volta chips, that's their most powerful individual graphics processor. It's got 16 of these in this box with this new technology they call the NV switch that gives them multiple terabytes per second of data transfer. So all the chips in this box can talk to any other chip in the box, and it's just a huge amount of processing power.
It sounds like a heater. It's what it sounds like.
Yeah, well, there is that too. It does generate a little bit of heat, and consumes some electricity. Yeah. Although one of the things that NVIDIA has really been focusing on at their their research group is redesigning like the small the lowest level elements of these chips, what's known as the flip flop, to reduce the power consumption to actually switch the state of a flip flop, which is the lowest level component of the transistors that that do all the calculations in a processor. And they've managed to cut the power consumption of a flip flop to change the state of a flip flop by 40%, which is pretty amazing.
That's a lot of power reduction.
It is.
You multiply that out by the amount of operations. So all of a sudden you're starting to you're talking real watts and volts and amps and stuff.
Oh yeah,
that's
and big dollars.
Yeah, and just the amount of economy you can then drive with that. And that's the thing, right? It's Moore's law, right? The technology is going to get more powerful and smaller, and it's going to get more powerful on an ongoing basis, which will also allow us to shrink it at the same time. And we've continued to see that over decades now. And it seems like every time you think that may be coming to an end, it continues to improve.
Especially on the GPU side, on the CPUs, the main, central processors, that drive our computers, those have kind of hit a brick wall in recent years, and basically the only way they're getting more performance out of those is by adding more cores to them.
Well, I mean, physics
the GPUs are still racing ahead.
Yeah. Well, and GPUs, because they're more specialized processor, right? So they can still, a CPU is it's a general purpose processor.
Well, it's both specialized and not specialized. It's more about the way that the chip is architected. Because it can do thousands of operations in parallel. So it's more of a these simplified operations, but doing thousands of them at the same time is what makes a GPU so powerful. If you can figure out how to code to it, and Nvidia has developed the software to be able to use these things for all kinds of different applications. Like they're using them in healthcare for diagnostics, for rendering things that, the data that's coming off of MRI machines, and being able to do all kinds of things with that, and as well as autonomous driving and countless other applications as well.
So, do you think that Nvidia is ahead of most players in the space, or like it seemed like you were really impressed with?
I think the main their main competitor right now at the high end of the autonomous driving space is Intel and Mobileye, and I think right now I think Nvidia is ahead. Intel and Mobileye, their approach, their architectural approach is a little different from Nvidia's, and from a pure performance standpoint, it may or may not, it's probably about a wash in terms of what the capabilities are. Intel has talked a lot about the power efficiency of their system, but theirs isn't coming out till they're not going to be sampling it till 2019. And Nvidia is sampling the Xavier parts now, so they've actually got real silicon that they're testing today and sharing with with their partners, OEMs and suppliers, and I think I'd say they're ahead right now. They may not necessarily stay ahead forever, but right now I'd say that they probably have the most capability of anybody with their processing capabilities for these automated vehicles. And the other thing that was really gratifying to hear, from the people at Nvidia is, their focus on, making sure that everything they're doing is, there's a couple of different standards for functional safety and security for automotive systems. There's what's known as ASIL-D and ISO 262. And they're really focused on making sure all their parts are completely automotive grade, so that they will be safe and reliable and robust in the automotive environment. And in the tech industry, that's not something you hear very often. I mean, they tend not to focus too much on safety.
Of any kind, good to hear. Clearly.
Yeah. So it's good to hear Nvidia, really put in a lot of emphasis on that.
Well, and that has to be a key part of it is you have to sacrifice some of that speed to make some of the reliability and guaranteed performance and safety when you're putting this stuff out. I can understand how that makes you chafe on the one hand when you're trying to drive this just vast technological change and just build these systems, but you almost have to slow yourself down and be like, wait, is it going to work at all temperature extremes? Like, is it going to be robust enough? Is it going to succumb to vibration in this environment? The automotive is a really harsh environment. And
oh yeah, I mean, these things have to work from minus 40 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit. They have to deal with, the vibration, as you said, cooling, especially when you've got high powered computers in there, they generate a lot of heat, and, you've got to dissipate that heat somewhere.
Yeah. And so I guess the last thing I think about too is like, is this stuff more and more possible, or is it only possible with the move to 48 volt with the heat that we're talking about? That's power consumption. And, we can pack as much power as we want on board these cars, but at 12 volts, you do bump up against limits that are practical. And so is 48 volts going to make it more possible to continue to add these features and to shrink this stuff down so that it's viable? Or is that really not?
Yeah, I mean, 48 volt is, generally considered to be the practical minimum for autonomous vehicles. And really, what we're going to end up seeing for most of these is high voltage systems. So they're going to be either either hybrid, plug-in hybrid, or battery electric, or perhaps fuel cell, high voltage systems to really get enough electrical power to both for the computers, the actuators, and also for all the sensors. The sensors take a lot of power as well.
Yeah, or we can just get like a Mr. Fusion or a very small nuclear reactor. Probably.
Yeah, or you could go take a defensive driving course for a couple $100, and just be more careful. Put your phone down, and get a car with a manual transmission and no electronics in it, and just drive it.
I was thinking today that a motorcycle would be a good antidote to it, but then with my luck, I'd get plowed into by somebody. I wouldn't hit anybody, but
Yeah, you'd get hit by a Tesla on autopilot.
Yeah, that's great. All right, let's move on. The New York show happened too, and so there was a bunch of announcements at that show. I think probably the most, the sort of like the top three, or at least the sort of splashiest for us, were obviously the Lincoln Aviator. I think probably tops a lot of lists. It was an impressive debut. Good to see them working in what I feel is the right direction, and what I say is definitely the most important thing. The Volkswagen.
Since when?
Since now. My kids are asleep, so I'm in charge again.
Okay.
The Volkswagen Tanoak? I think it's Tanoak.
I think so, yeah.
And the new Nissan Altima.
Maybe that's Volkswagen's real problem, is they got to come up with names that people can actually pronounce.
Yeah, that's not going to be their problem with that. So anyway, we should let's start with the best one, right? The Aviator. So that clearly made an impression.
Yeah, the Aviator name is back. The last time Lincoln had a model with that name, it was a Lincoln badged version of the Ford Explorer. And what do you know? This is a Lincoln badged version of the next generation Ford Explorer.
But smartly, they're rolling out the Lincoln first.
Yes.
Honestly, and you mentioned I guess it was last week, that I should come up with an ad campaign for Lincoln. And so the reintroduction of the Aviator gives me a hook for the ad campaign. So I'm thinking about it, and we'll get back to that. We'll do something, and then we'll put it in front of Lincoln and see what happens. But anyway, it's an all new platform.
It's an all new platform. This is one of the five flexible architectures that they talked about a few weeks ago going forward. So, those five were, front wheel drive unibody, rear wheel drive unibody, body on frame, commercial van, and the EVs. And so this is on their new rear drive / all wheel drive unibody platform. This particular one what they showed as a concept, which will be coming in production probably sometime early 2019, and will probably look very much like this concept. I don't think it's going to diverge very much from this concept, much as the Navigator, and the Continental before it both stayed pretty close to their concept versions. This one has an EcoBoost, actually Lincoln is not using the EcoBoost branding anymore. It's just a twin turbo direct injected V6.
They should call it Twin Force, because it was supposed to be Twin Force.
Yeah, well, it's the original iteration of it in the MKR concept was Twin Force.
It's such a good name.
Yep. But anyway, so you've got this engine in there, and it's a plug-in hybrid, and no details yet on any of the plug-in hybrid stuff, what the range or anything else is going to be. But presumably the basic hybrid drive unit is going to be a variation of the same one that is currently being developed for the F-150 and the Mustang. And it'll be applied here with a bigger battery to make it a plug-in hybrid. It'll probably have somewhere in the range of 25 to 30 miles of electric drive range. And I think this is probably the best iteration yet of the new Lincoln design language.
I think it's lovely. Inside and out. They've done a really fantastic job making this vehicle look good. I saw, I think it was Autoblog that said, it looks good for a 3-row crossover, or maybe it was Jalopnik, either or. This is like, no. It just looks good. It's a nice, sharp looking design language. It really works here, and it's going to stand out on the road. I really, really love the interior theme. It's sort of low
it's very well. It's very much like the Navigator.
Yeah, it's very clean
the inside. Yeah.
The platform, I think, is probably the most interesting thing to me. Just like, okay, so it's a unibody. It's rear wheel drive based, and it looked like Alex Kirstein from Autoblog was peeking under it, and he seemed to think that the IRS, the independent rear suspension, shared quite a bit with the Mustang, which isn't like, that's not that much of a surprise. That's smart, quite honestly, if you're an automaker and you have those.
Yeah, well,
things.
I don't know. I can't guarantee that it would actually share that there would be any interchangeable parts with the Mustang, but I'm almost certain. It would be crazy for Ford not to use the same architecture as the Mustang in the back, which is, it's what they call an integral link layout. And, that suspension layout actually first came out on the Fusion and Mondeo. So, they took that, they took a variation of that and applied it to the Mustang. And now, I'm sure they're taking another variation of that to apply it to these SUVs. So there's probably some beefier components. The dimensions, are probably a little bit different. They may have different track and, some of the other dimensions, but it's the same basic type of layout. And it's a system that works really well and provides a great balance of both ride quality and handling capabilities.
Yeah, and I would assume too that they, maybe where the Mustang has aluminum arms, you might have something like a steel arm or something.
Not necessarily.
Like cast versus forged, or just something. Maybe.
It's probably still mostly aluminum.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, they may use some forgings in place of castings for some extra strength, or use some steel components. Certainly, different things like different bushings, and the exact dimensions might be different as well. So they're I would guess they're probably not going to be interchangeable with a Mustang. But if you lay them side by side, you can see that it's the same basic type of suspension layout.
Well, that's fine. For years, the Mustang and the Explorer had that. The same basic, live axle. So
yeah,
why should it be any different?
Exactly.
And I think Mustang guys now will go out and they'll snag the 8.8s out of the last of the first gen Explorers, because they did have the live axle with the disc brakes. Jeep guys do it too, because the 8.8s are really stout. They're good axle, and so you can beat.
Yeah, they go really nicely into an S197 or a Fox body. Yeah.
So there's all kinds of trickery for it, and if you have the parts, you might as well use them. So I think the other sort of biggest introduction, at least out of our tiny list here, is the Volkswagen Tanoak. And there were rumors of a Volkswagen pickup truck. I'm underwhelmed. I don't think it's going to do well. I think it's going to fail in the market. And I have legitimate thoughts about that, other than not liking it. But what's your take on it?
Well, I think it actually looks kind of cool.
It definitely looks cool. Yeah.
It's based on the Atlas platform. So, basically, Volkswagen has, torn a page out of the Honda playbook, where you've got the Ridgeline that's based on the same platform as the Pilot and the Odyssey. And, so Volkswagen's done the same thing here. It's a unibody setup, front / all-wheel drive. Why do you think this will fail?
Well, so
assuming they even build it, because right now this is just a concept.
Yeah, and it's not it's not a terrible concept. I think that if Volkswagen were to introduce a pickup truck on the Atlas sort of architecture, they could sell a number of them. I don't think they should get their hopes up, but there are people who like the Volkswagen way of doing things that might otherwise purchase a truck, but they don't have something that they like enough. And there's that weirdness factor as well that sort of works in favor there. But this concept, it's not a crew cab, and that like Honda, they made the Ridgeline a crew cab, and I think that's a really smart move because the Ridgeline is supposed to be the suburban truck, right? It's the weekend warrior pickup. It's the perfect pickup for the occasional pickup user. It has enough towing that it's going to do fine for what most people should be towing anyway. It's super comfortable. It's roomy. It's well equipped. It's well priced against the full size pickups that offer the same level of equipment and space and that kind of stuff. So the Tanoak, I think it's how you say it other than Tanoak. I don't know. But anyway, it's an extended cab. So that right there, less practical. And you get less interior space, and it's harder to use. Not only that, while the new fuel economy regs that are supposed to sort of take more of a bite out of trucks are in question right now with what's going on with the EPA. The extended cab was sort of poised to take over. I mean, the crew cab is kind of poised to take over the truck market anyway, because small footprint trucks need to return better fuel economy. And that's the thing and there's a great pickuptrucks.com post about this. The regular cab pickup has the smallest footprint of all pickups. And there's like a measurement based thing that you do to figure out what the actual footprint of it is. And that's what determines the fuel economy that's supposed to. It's
basically
return.
The wheelbase times the track.
Yeah. And so when you get a longer pickup, the footprint is larger. Its fuel economy requirements are lower. And with all of the efficiencies automakers have found, it's easier to hit that target. It's less expensive. And if you don't hit it, you don't ding the cafe as much and you don't pay fines and stuff. So I feel like they have to carefully position this truck to work in the market. And I don't think that it's positioned correctly at this point. I could be totally wrong. I just think that there's a lot of practical reasons that could sink it.
I don't totally disagree with you, but let me, make some of the, potential case for, how this might work out if they decide to move forward with it. So first of all, I would not be at all surprised, if VW does move ahead, and produce this thing. I would guess that they probably will do a proper crew cab version. Excuse me.
Woo! Late night.
Yeah. So I think it'll be they would do it as a crew cab with probably a little bit longer wheelbase than what we see on this concept. To accommodate a full set of doors and some extra legroom in that second row, and then part of the rationale for doing this would be to get some extra economies of scale out of the out of what they're already doing for the Atlas. So they're all they also showed this another Atlas variant, a 2-row Atlas variant, a coupe. What I'm calling a coupe version of it. I forget the exact name of it. It's
the Atlas Cross, isn't it, or something like that?
Yeah, something like that, or Sport Cross, or something silly like that, or Cross Sport. It's Atlas Cross Sport.
It's a crossover cross sport.
But
cross.
The thing is, all these, they're using, they're using the same platform and a lot of the same hardware underneath, so they can get some extra volume out of it with probably a relatively minimal engineering investment compared to developing a complete vehicle from the ground up. And then the other thing I would expect them to do, on this, and actually the entire Atlas lineup would be, VW has been quite aggressive. They're being quite aggressive on a lot of their vehicles in Europe already, and they'll be starting here later this year on their premium brands in the U.S. with 48 volt electrical systems. So they're instead of going back to diesel, they're using 48 volt electrical systems and mild hybrids, which can help. So they could do both the V6 and potentially a 4-cylinder version of this with a 48 volt electrical system that gives extra torque. To give it some extra payload capability and everything else. So they could potentially have a vehicle that would help them get some extra volume, some extra margins, profit margins, and without hurting their CAFE numbers too much.
Okay. I mean, I don't think.
I mean, I don't know for sure that that's what they would do. But I'm just making the counter argument to what you just said.
No, and honestly, more truck choice is not a bad thing, especially in a slightly more manageable size than the behemoths that the mainstream, the sort of big three are making. It's going to be really hard to compete on price with those trucks. That's all. And so they've got to offer something different. And, a Volkswagen pickup that has a novelty factor. So it could
remember
work.
The last Volkswagen pickup sold in America?
It was the Caddy. What's the Rabbit?
The Rabbit. Yeah.
Which it was super cool and half useless, but also super cool. Especially when you swap.
Maybe more than half useless, but yeah.
I mean, it was always interesting when you'd see one that had GTI stuff swapped into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So the last thing from New York was the Nissan Altima, and I kind of I yawned at that. I don't know if it's me or just the car or the late hour. I don't know. What was you have it on the list here? What was your take about it?
Well, there's a couple interesting things about this. I mean, the design, that's always a subjective thing, but there's clearly, heavily inspired by the V-Motion 2 concept from last year at the Detroit show. They've taken that and basically toned it down a little bit to create this Altima. But there's some interesting technical aspects of this. They are ditching the V6 engine for this Altima, and this is going to be the first Nissan branded vehicle with the variable compression ratio 4-cylinder that just recently debuted in the Infiniti QX50, which should be a very interesting solution in here. And they claim that that engine gets 27% better fuel economy than the V6, which is pretty substantial.
Yeah. Then the V6 is like, the VQ is not the most fuel efficient V6 in the world. Let's be honest. But
no.
Still, that's pretty good. Almost 30%. That's a big number.
It is. And then the other thing that's going on here that they're going to offer on here is their ProPilot Assist system, which is debuted on the at least in North America, debuted on the Rogue last fall and is also available on the Leaf now. And that's Nissan's first pass at a level 2-ish semi-automated system, kind of autopilot like. And I think it's a bit. I think it's a bit less capable than some of the other systems out there. On the other hand, my experience with it in the Leaf, and also in the Rogue when we did the preview drive last summer, was actually quite good. Quite good at what it can do and very consistent. And I think it's probably more consistent than the Tesla system. And Nissan promises to keep upgrading it. Although I don't think that they're going to offer functional upgrades to the cars they're selling now. But cars coming in 2019 and beyond, it will be getting additional functionality like the ability to do auto lane changes and so on. So that this will be the first kind of mainstream mid-size sedan to offer that kind of capability.
I mean, Nissan, again, like we were just talking about having something unique to offer within a niche, and it's all of a sudden mainstream mid-size sedans are kind of a quiet place to be, and yet if you're going to have any hope of continued success with them, because they still sell, they just they're not crossovers at the moment. Crossovers are super hot. When people get tired of that, they can default back to cars and having some unique things. First of all, Nissan styling has been pretty interesting on its own. Like the Altima itself is not my favorite, but I really like the Maxima, and this new Altima looks good, and it looks like an evolution, and it has a vibe about it, so that's good. And then the variable compression engine and their level of tech, it has been good. Nissan has been good about putting tech in the cars, even going back to when NAV first started getting real popular. Nissan's system was better than others, and now it's kind of quaint, but it's still pretty good, if limited, and it's gotten better. So it'll be interesting to see how well it does out there in the market against, we were talking about the Accord at the beginning of the show, how it stacks up against sort of the king of the segment.
Yeah, there's certainly looks like there's a lot of interesting bits about this car, and we'll just have to wait to see how it actually drives. But how, as you say, how it does in the market. I mean, certainly the mid-size sedan market is still almost 2 million vehicles a year, even as it has been continuing to shrink. So that's still a lot of cars that get sold in that segment.
So, are they sharing this at all with Renault or any of the other business units?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that the platform of this Altima will be shared with other new Renault and also Mitsubishi models going forward.
Oh, that's right.
As well as additional Nissan models. Like we'll probably see the next generation Rogue will probably be based on this platform architecture. Maybe even the next generation Pathfinder. So I mean, everybody's designing their architectures to be more flexible, so they can be stretched in different ways or shrunk as needed for different applications.
Yeah. Hey, anything they can do to make the Pathfinder drive better, I'm down with. That thing is it's big and not fun. I forgot about that they're tied up with Mitsubishi now, so they could bring out a new Galant.
Maybe we'll get a new Galant. Yeah. That's actually a halfway decent car.
All right. Well, with that, let's see. Let's look at the rest of the list. We had just Waymo Jaguar. Did you have an interview with them?
No, they were in New York. I was in California. Just wanted to mention that they Waymo hooked up with Jaguar Land Rover and is going to buy up to 20,000 I-Paces and put their automated driving system on it to offer as a premium option. Premium mobility service option, so you'll have the, kind of the mainstream stuff with the Chrysler Pacifica hybrids, and then the Jag I-Pace, as your up level offering. And then there's some reports out today that Waymo is very close to a deal with Honda for an automated delivery vehicle, which would not be based on any current production vehicle, but rather be something that's specifically designed for doing deliveries, which is it's an interesting approach by Waymo. If you look at like Ford, for example, they're designing their autonomous vehicle specifically to be autonomous, but to be flexible enough to use the same vehicle for carrying passengers, delivering packages, and things like that. And to keep it active all day long, and keep it generating revenue. Whereas, Waymo is taking vehicles that are more specific to each use case, which may end up hurting their utilization numbers for these vehicles, but it may make the vehicles themselves more appealing for the different use cases, depending on how it gets executed by Ford or other companies following that kind of model. So it'll be interesting to see how this all works out from a business standpoint for Waymo.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little annoyed that everybody continues to go high end with this stuff versus take that most basic car. I'm trying to think of like, okay, if you're going to deal with Ford, like, take that tiny little 3-cylinder Fiesta, make that thing autonomous, make it cheap and accessible, versus Jaguar. But I guess an autonomous Jaguar has a lot more cachet.
Well, you also, you have to look at the business case. If you can create a service around a Jaguar that you can charge a higher price point for, you've got a more premium experience in that vehicle. Perhaps you guarantee shorter wait times, things like that. You may have the potential for more profitability from that vehicle. It could offset, perhaps the lower margins on, something like, like an autonomous Fiesta. I think, what Ford seems to be leaning towards is something more along the lines of, kind of a next generation Transit Connect that is autonomous, and that has a flexible interior that, you can drop the seats down, put in some racks for packages, use it for package delivery at certain times of the day, use it to carry people at other times of the day. So that you've got the same vehicles in operation, 20 plus hours a day or more, doing revenue generating work.
Like a train.
Yes. Or an airliner.
Or an airline, yeah. But I mean, that's a great model that when you think about it, there's still going to be some humps to just convince the public that that's what they want to do. But I could see that having limited success in certain areas, at least at first too. It could be very successful in somewhere like an urban core, for sure.
Yeah, and I'm sure that that Ford will also be using some Lincoln branded vehicles to offer something similar to what Waymo is planning with Jaguar and what other premium brands are doing. So we're going to see a spectrum of different kinds of vehicles. And you talked about using small vehicles. Look at what GM's doing. They're using the Bolt as their first autonomous platform. So that's basically what you just asked for.
Yeah, but it's just not Waymo.
True. But Waymo's not done yet. Who knows who else they will cut deals with.
That's true.
They've got Chrysler, and they've got Jaguar now, and potentially Honda, and who knows what else will come along.
All right. Well, in the meantime, we'll just try to avoid the self-driving cars because they're going to try to crash into us. So it turns out, in terms of reader questions and feedback, I think we managed to sell somebody TLX A-Spec.
Yeah, it looks like that. Who was it?
Richard Cifuentes.
Yeah, he looks like he picked up a blue TLX A-Spec today, which is fantastic. And as you say, that is a great color. That is the color I would choose if given the option.
Yeah, I really liked the white one that I had. I loved that car. That's a cool car. And I'm sure he got a good deal because it's a good deal anyway. We also had a question. We talked about the Altima. What do we think of the new RAV4 and the new Altima? There's a question from Jared Henshaw on Twitter. So, quickly, your thoughts on the RAV4?
It's another compact crossover, and it's typical of the kind of the direction that Toyota is going now with their design. It's more styled than before.
Oh yeah.
And like the current generation Highlander, they've made it a little more truck-like this time around compared to the previous generation. It's not bad. I haven't seen it in person, so
right.
It's hard to say for sure, but certainly from the photos I've seen, it looks fine. I'm not an SUV person myself. I'm not inclined to buy that sort of vehicle.
It's not an SUV anyway.
Well, there's that, or a crossover, or anything like that. So I'm sure it will do just fine in the marketplace.
Every time I see it, I mistake it at first for the Forester. So I don't know what that says about it. I think it's fine. My hope is that they have upgraded the interior and the infotainment to really play in the segment, because the last time I was in a RAV4, those were two areas that were lacking. I really have not been enamored with Toyota's interior materials and design and even fit and finish over the years. Some cars have been better than others, but I hope that they have stepped it up there, because the competition certainly has. So from the outside, it's lovely. And it looks like there's a little bit more variety with different versions, or at least different concepts that they showed. So it might be.
Yeah, I mean, you've got some two-tone approaches, kind of like what Jeep's been doing with the Compass, where you can get contrasting roof colors, so black or white roof, on a different lower body. I think it definitely looks a little truckier. I mean, it's kind of like a mix of what they've done on the current generation Highlander, a bit of the CHR, and a bit of the Camry, all kind of blended in here. And I'm sure that within a couple of years, this will be Toyota's best-selling vehicle in North America. It'll probably overtake the Camry and the Corolla and become their best-selling vehicle, just like the CR-V and the Rogue have done for Honda and Nissan.
Yeah, and they deserve it. They've been selling the hell out of it. I'm not a huge fan of the RAV4, but I recommend it all the time, because it's like, what do you want? Okay, you want something that's just going to go places and not break. Yeah, you want a RAV4.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could, a CRV would be just as good in that case, or a Rogue.
Or the Rogue.
Yeah, or a Forester.
I've recommended the Rogue too. I like the Rogue quite a bit. Yeah, see? So we just talked about how we don't like crossovers, and then we just recommended like 5 of them to ourselves.
Well, no, not to ourselves. To the general consumer out there that insists on buying a compact crossover instead of buying a proper car like they should.
That's true.
If you must buy a crossover, any of these are viable options for you.
Sure. All right, one more thing before we go.
Do you want to answer the question from Peter from Bavaria, or save that for next week?
You know what? I was going to say, why don't we answer, but let's save it.
Let's leave it for next week.
Yeah. Because you've been running long and we made you yawn already. So
yeah, well, and I've got some things to say on this topic. All
right.
Let's save that one. So we will get to your question, Peter.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it came in before stuff happened. So yeah, it's a different perspective to look at. All right, so that is it for podcast for episode 63 of Wheelbearings. So we'll catch everybody next week.
All right, see ya.